বিজয়ফুল আমাদের মুক্তিযুদ্ধ বিজয়ের প্রতীক। ডিসেম্বরের 1 থেকে 16 তারিখ প্রতিদিন বিজয় ফুল পড়ুন, বিজয়কে বুকে ধারণ করুন।
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. Today we have gathered here to celebrate 50th independence of Bangladesh, and we have very interesting guests today. We have children with us to talk to our eminent economist, Dr. Selim Jahan, who is not also only an economist, he is a former professor of Dhaka University and also a very literary writer. Dr. Selim Jahan, thank you for being with us, and I'm sure you'd enjoy the show with our children, and children is very interested to have you with us.
Thank you, Farah. It's always been a pleasure to be with you and with the children. So I'm looking forward to having a very fruitful discussion with you all.
Definitely. And today, children are looking forward to listen to the stories from you about the 1971. They would like to know about the independence of Bangladesh. How did Bangladesh achieve independence, and how did Bangladesh do all in this 50 years? So you'll tell them a little stories, and they will have their own question to ask you. So I'm sure you wouldn't feel bored with their question. Thank you. Now I would like to welcome our children. Can I have my first guest, Yusuf, Aayan, Kabir, on the screen, please?
Hello, I'm Yusuf.
Hello, Aayan. How have you been?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. And meet Dr. Selim Jahan. He's our special guest.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Nice meeting you, Yusuf.
Nice to meet you too.
Would you like to introduce yourself? Would you like to say a little bit about yourself, please?
So my name is Yusuf Aayan Kabir, and I'm in year 8, and I'm studying at secondary school.
Hello, Ryan.
Hello.
Good evening. How have you been?
Good, you?
Good. So would you like to introduce yourself, please?
I'm Rayan Pracchya. I study in year 7, and I go to Westcliff High School for Boys, which is nearby my house.
How lovely. Thank you for being with us.
Pracchya.
Can I have my next guest, Auria Zahir?
Hi, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Auria, would you like to tell us about yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Auria Zahir. I'm 12 and I'm from Bristol.
How lovely. Thank you. Can I have our next guest, Wafeeq Zaman?
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Wafeeq. I'm in year 10 studying a few subjects for my GCSE at the moment at secondary school.
Thank you, Wafeeq. And last but not the least, can I have my last guest, Aydan Ahmad, please?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Aydan Ahmad. I'm 11 years old, and I live in Southeast London.
Nice meeting you, Aydan.
You too.
Thank you, everyone. And now I would like you to meet our guest, Dr. Selim Jahan. You can see him on the screen. He's a very renowned economist, and he has represented Bangladesh in lots of places, in big seminars. He spoke about the development of Bangladesh, and he has lots of stories from the 1971 to share with you. So let's not waste any time, and let's go to him and let's hear the stories from him. And later on, you can ask him question, and you also can share each of your stories. So when you have any question, please raise your hand and you can ask him any question. Thank you. Dr. Selim Jahan, would you like to take the floor, please?
Okay, I think it's always a pleasure, and it has been a pleasure actually talking to the children. I call them children, but they are not children in the sense of the children. But I have been able to talk to them on other occasions about Bangladesh and its independence and all kinds of things. but this is a special occasion in the sense that Bangladesh this year is celebrating its 50th year of independence. It's the golden jubilee of the independence of Bangladesh. You must have seen, I think yesterday or day before yesterday actually, lots of the monuments in Britain in different places being lit in green and red. The Eye of London was in green and red. The Manchester Central Library was in green and red. And it has been quite an event actually in London also to celebrate the Golden Jubilee of Bangladesh. Now, to talk about 1971, our War of Independence, I think it's difficult to identify what to start actually. But let me start with the year 1969, because I think that was a turning point in the history of Bangladesh and the lives of the people of Bangladesh. That was exactly the year when we entered the university after finishing our colleges to start our undergraduate studies. And at that point, I think, was a kind of a point where there are lots of movements, because between 1958 and 68, the whole country, Pakistan at that point in time, was under military dictatorship. And as a result of it, the rights of the people of Bangladesh, their opportunities all were curtailed. Actually, starting in 1947, when Pakistan was created, Bangladesh was some sort of a colony to West Pakistan. It was a place where from all the raw materials used to be exported to Pakistan. The foreign exchange earned from the export of jute was used to build Pakistan. And then there was also a lot of anger within the Bangladeshis at that point in time, within Bengalis, because Bengali was not recognized as a state language. So there was a language movement in 1952 to establish the right of our language. And then it was followed by a series of students' movement, labor movement, and all kinds of things. And all this, in a way, took a new form and a new dimension in 1969, when there was a mass movement. And that was exactly the time when we entered the university. So the whole situation within the university, outside the university, was a mixture of anger, was a mixture of getting our self-determination, getting our independence, that kind of thing. So in 1972, things happened. Just to give you a brief context of our War of Independence. One was that there was an election for the National Assembly, or which is equivalent to the British Parliament. And the Awami League won the majority, and with 109 seats. And the second thing that happened, so when Awami League won the majority, that was the first time we were thinking that the Bengalis would take the helm of Pakistan, it would determine the future of Pakistan, or would basically be at the seat of power. And the second thing that happened was in November 1970, there was a big cyclone in then East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh, and millions of people have died. But there was a kind of no recognition, there was no help from Pakistan. So that basically gave us the feeling that even though we were part of Pakistan, but we are not part of it, in the sense that we have been ignored, and they were basically showing a kind of a blind eye and a blind mind to the people or to the citizens of the eastern part of Pakistan. I remember that on 1st of March 1971, the then president of Pakistan declared that the session of the National Assembly would not be held as was planned. And as a result, there were lots of anger. People came on the street, and there were lots of movements against Pakistan, and there were kind of demands to get out of the Pakistan. And on 2nd of March 1971, the flag of Bangladesh was hoisted in Dhaka University. The difference between that particular flag and the flag that we see nowadays is that that flag also had the map of Pakistan, of Bangladesh, a golden map inside the flag, just on the red circle. And then on the 7th of March, the historic speech by Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the father of the nation, where he basically ended the speech by saying that this time the struggle is for independence and the struggle is for emancipation. And for the next few weeks, there have been discussions and everything. And then came this black night of 25th of March, when basically the Pakistani soldiers attacked different parts of Dhaka, starting with the Dhaka University, its residences, dormitories, the places where the teachers used to live, the quarters of the teachers, and they basically unleashed a kind of an attack from all sides on the people of Bangladesh. So on the 26th of March, the independence was declared by Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman in a formal way. That declaration of independence was read out by many on radio, which was established at Kalurghat in Chittagong, and it was a shortwave radio, and there were declarations from there. That's how the independence struggle or the war of independence started. Farah, I think I will stop at this point if they have any questions, and then you can also ask me questions to move forward. Yes, Aydan, I can see your hand raised.
The students and the doctors and the university teachers, you said they were attacked in Bangladesh. Mm-hmm. They weren't fighting that much during the war. So how come they were involved in the fight? They were involved in the killing.
Okay, I think that's a very good question. In fact, the fighting didn't start when they were killed. The reason they were attacked, I mean, there are a few reasons. One is that, as you know, that Dhaka University basically played a prominent role in the history of all the movements that Bangladesh went through between 1947 to 1971. The students and the teachers of Dhaka University took part in the language movement. The students also took part in the movements in the 60s. The mass movement in 69, the students took part. So as a result, first, the Pakistanis knew that the Dhaka University was the kind of a breeding ground of all kinds of independent thoughts and the movements and everything. So they became the target, or the university became the target to the Pakistani rulers. The second reason is that the teachers, particularly the professors and the teachers, they were on the forefront of new thoughts. They were on the forefront to give the students a kind of an understanding how we have been exploited and how Pakistan was basically exploiting Bangladesh on every front. So they were the initiators of new thoughts. They were the initiators of the thoughts about self-determination, thoughts about autonomy and all kinds of things. So they were on the list of the Pakistani rulers there. And the third reason is they thought, the Pakistani rulers thought, that if they can actually destroy Dhaka University in every sense of the word, attacking the students, killing the teachers and everything, that would actually throw a blow to the whole movement, a blow to the desire of Bengalis to get out of Pakistan. So that was the reason why the Dhaka University was attacked as the main center on the 25th of March. And if I can just have a footnote to that, that after this attack and when the independence was declared, it was the students of Dhaka University who joined the liberation war, who was part of the Mukti Juddha, or the War of the Liberation. And the teachers of the Dhaka University crossed the border. And when the interim government of Bangladesh was created, they also played a role in moving forward the agenda of the government, and also went out in the outside world to talk about Bangladesh and its liberation movement. So, to short answer to your question, that till 25th of January 1971, as the university, its students and its teachers were part or at the center of moving forward all the movements of Bangladesh, they became the prime target for the rulers of Pakistan.
Thank you, Aydan, for asking that question, and that intrigues me to go to Auria Zahir, because I think what Aydan has asked, Auria has a story to share on that. So I would ask Auria to share a story. I mean, she was telling me about the similar thing. So if Auria shares the story, then other children can learn exactly what happened, and then Dr. Selim Jahan, you would be able to give some more light on that. Auria, would you like to share your story, please?
Yeah. Thank you. Hi.
You.
I'm going to be talking about Captain Dr. Sitara Begum. She was a doctor in the war, and I chose her because my mum is a doctor as well, so they're both quite inspiring. Captain Dr. Sitara Begum is one of 2 women in Bangladesh who has received the Bir Pratik Award. She completed her MBBS from Dhaka Medical College. She was commissioned as a lieutenant in the Medical Corps of Pakistan Army in 1970. She was stationed in Kumilla Cantonment. After the start of 1971 Liberation War, she defected and fled to Meghalaya with the aid of Mukti Bahini, the freedom fighters. It was her love for her motherland for which she risked her life. She was appointed as a commanding officer of Bangladesh Hospital, a Mukti Bahini hospital located inside India that operated during the war. It was a temporary hospital with 400 beds only. The center suffered from shortages of equipment and proper medical facilities. She, along with her team, valiantly served in spite of the shortcomings. She managed to provide best possible care and treatment to the injured freedom fighters. She returned to Dhaka after the independence of Bangladesh.
Great.
That's very, very inspiring, Auria. And I'm sure, Aydan, you got your answer. Dr. Selim Jahan, would you like to say something on that, please?
No, I think that's I heard about Captain Sitara Begum, and thank you, Auria, for telling us the story. I mean, there are other doctors, there are other nurses who actually played a major role during the War of Liberation. The doctors who have crossed the borders actually were looking after the soldiers in makeshift hospitals at that point in time. And the doctors who were inside the country, they also, when the Mukti Joddhas or were used to brought to them, not openly, they used to treat them. Lots of the doctors donated money and other things to the War of Liberation. So the intelligentsia actually played a major role in supporting the War of Liberation and the Mukti Joddhas. But there are numerous stories about it. Captain Sitara Begum's story is a brilliant one. And I think we should also collect all such stories from people who have seen the War of Liberation, have taken part into it. If you talk to the freedom fighters, as Auria was mentioning, some of them can tell you lots of the stories of the people who have supported them. When the freedom fighters were fighting in villages, in other places, lots of the mothers used to feed them. They used to take shelter in different houses. Different boatmen used to carry them across the river. So it was a war where everybody, except for a few, have taken part. A part of those people took part directly as freedom fighters, but then there were other people who have supported that war in different ways. So we all were part of that Mukti Juddha, or the war of liberation. But thank you, Auria, for bringing out that story, because sometimes some of those stories remain untold, and these people remain unsung heroes. Thank you. Farah, do you want me to continue, or you have other questions?
No, that's perfectly all right. Thank you. I think Wafeeq is waiting to ask you question about the development of Bangladesh or something. I'm not sure, but he was telling me. So Wafeeq, would you like to come on the screen and tell us what you have in your mind? You can ask anything to Dr. Selim Jahan, and I'm just picking one by one because none of you are raising hands, it seems. So Pracchya, Yusuf, you can also pop in wherever you want. So please feel free to do that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Hello, Wafeeq.
Hello. So right now at school, my favorite topic is economics.
Okay.
So most of the questions I have are based around the economic side of Bangladesh over the last few years or decades.
Mm-hmm.
So as of today, Bangladesh has liberated and been independent for 50 years now. We have freedom in many aspects such as speech, language, economy, and so on. So Selim uncle, how would you explain your economy before and after liberation?
Okay, I think that's a great question. I mean, it's not only for the students of economics, but also for people in general. When Pakistan was created in 1947, as I was hinting to, Bangladesh was more of a colony to Pakistan in two ways, or three ways maybe. The first was that it was the place from which the raw materials used to be exported to Pakistan. And remember that at that point in time, jute was the main export of whole of Pakistan. And the foreign exchange that used to be earned from the export of jute were actually transferred to Pakistan and were used for the development of cities like Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, and all kinds of things. So that's one part of exploitation. The other part of exploitation that they have used Bangladesh, the then East Pakistan, as a kind of a market for finished products. So they were taking raw materials to Pakistan, manufactured things, and then they were again selling it to East Pakistan and the people of East Pakistan. So we are deprived in two ways. We are deprived that we are not getting our fair share of the raw materials and our export, and we are deprived because we became the kind of the market for West Pakistan, and they were benefiting from that. So that was the second kind of exploitation. The third kind of exploitation was in terms of opportunities. In an independent country, the citizens of Bangladesh were not getting their share of opportunities, whether it is in jobs, whether it is in representation, whether it is in politics, and all kinds of things. So by 1952, when there was an attack on our language, that was not only an attack on our language, but that was an attack on our identity, that was an attack on our autonomy, that was an attack on our freedom. And soon the people of Bangladesh or Bengalis understood that actually Pakistan is not a tenable proposition. And the two wings of the country were separated by 1,000 miles, and one particular part is being used as a source of exploitation. So there have been movements. There have been movements, the language movement you all know in 1952. There have been movements in 54. There were students' movement in 62, 69, and all kinds of things. So now, the first part we have described that how the exploitation took place. Now, between 1972 and now, 50 years, because we are celebrating the 50 years of our independence, if I make a kind of a comparative, not a study, but kind of a comparison, let me identify some of these indices, some of the numbers. If we look at the per capita income of Bangladesh in 1972, it was $98. Today, the per capita income of Bangladesh is about $2,064. So you can see from, say, if even you take 100, how much it has increased in terms of per capita income. In 1972, the total population of Bangladesh was more than that of Pakistan. But today, since we have a handle on the whole question of the population growth, today the total number of people in Bangladesh is less than the total number of people in Pakistan. Second. The third, the economy of Bangladesh, the size of the economy in 1972 was about roughly $75 billion. Today, that economy is $330 billion. So by comparing 1972 and 2021, we can see how the economy has progressed. And mind you, all this started from devastation. In 72, what we have had in Bangladesh was a devastated economy, devastated infrastructure. So like a phoenix out of the ashes, Bangladesh actually rose from that devastation and then have made this kind of progress. The third point I would like to make that it's not only in terms of time between 72 and 2021. If we compare ourselves with our neighbors like India or Pakistan, today the life expectancy in Bangladesh is 73 years, and that of India is 66, that of Pakistan is 65. India has a more per capita income than Bangladesh. Still, in terms of life expectancy, they are lower than Bangladesh. The under 5 mortality rate, children who die before reaching age 5, that is 34 in Bangladesh per 1,000 children. In Pakistan, in India, that is 45. In Pakistan, that is 65. So it means that Bangladesh has been able to transform its growth and its income more successfully into socioeconomic areas and socioeconomic indicators. So, in nutshell, we have every reason to be proud and every reason to celebrate the kind of the success and the achievements that we have made. Yet, there are a number of problems, or there are a number of challenges. First, inequality is a challenge in Bangladesh, and inequality has been increasing. It's not only in terms of inequality of income or health, it is also inequality in terms of access to education, access to health services. I think that's a major problem we have to deal with it. Second, economy can grow and economy can flourish if you have the public administration, the institutions which are efficient. There are a lot of inefficiencies in the public administration system of Bangladesh and also the institutions. And third, I think there are also challenges coming from outside. I mean, if you take the COVID situation right now, 2 of the major foreign exchange earning sectors of Bangladesh are being affected by that. The first one is the garment industry. The demand and the kind of the order of garments from Bangladesh is still suffering because of the COVID. And the second one where there has been kind of a decline is that of the remittances sent by the Bangladeshi workers who are working outside. And so I think if we can face the challenges of inequality, we can face the challenges of inefficiency for our public administration, and we can take advantage of the opportunities from the outside world in terms of remittances and also in terms of our exports of garment industry, I think we can do better in coming days. Farah.
Thank you, Dr. Selim Jahan. I'm sure Wafeeq has more questions. Now I would like to go to Pracchya. Rayan Pracchya, please.
My question is...
After Rayan, Yusuf, please, come on screen and share whatever you have in mind. Thank you.
My question is, when the people in Bangladesh are doing all the farming for the people in Pakistan, they don't get a decent pay. and they don't really let them have like the crops and stuff. Why is that?
It happens in any kind of colony. I mean, if I compare the situation before 1947, for example, when we're part of the colony of Britain, as you know that the Lancashire, there was this whole garment industry developed in Lancashire by bringing in the kind of the fibre from British India. So when a part of a country treats the other part of the country not as equal, but as kind of a subservient and as a kind of a colony, then you try to take advantage of that part of the country. This is exactly what happened in Pakistan. Because even though we were part of the same country, and the Bengalis were also the citizens of Pakistan, starting from 1947, we were not treated equally, we were not treated with respect, and we were seen as a kind of a source of their income, as a kind of a source of their exploitation. So when the rulers of Pakistan did not treat the Bengalis as equal citizens in the country of Pakistan, this is exactly what is going to happen. And even in today's world, in other countries, which became separated, say if you take the example of Ethiopia, and one part of was Eritrea in the 1980s, 1990s, and in 2000. And Eritrea actually was exploited by the rest of Ethiopia, and they got out of Ethiopia and became independent. So a short answer to your question is that when you are not treating a particular part of your country as equal, or you are treating them as a kind of a colony, that is where this kind of exploitation and this kind of unequal treatment of people, you are referring to the farmers in Bangladesh, would happen. And that is exactly what happened in Pakistan.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Who is
Yusuf, Aayan, Kabir.
I just wanted to ask two questions. So, how did foreign countries assist in getting Bangladesh independence? And the life expectancy in Bangladesh is higher. Isn't this due to other reasons like better living conditions and hospitality?
Sure. I mean, the first question, I think that's a great question. When the independence movement and the war of independence started, it's not that every country supported Pakistan. Every country supported Bangladesh. In fact, the first country which actually, or the first two countries which actually denounced the kind of the attack on Bengalis was Soviet Union, and at that point in time, and India. So throughout the whole war of independence, both the countries supported us on many fronts. I mean, India has been a great support. You know that 100 million people have crossed to India as refugees, and they took refuge in different parts of India, Calcutta or Kolkata, Agartala, Meghalaya, and all those places. And then I think throughout the whole our war of independence, the Mukti Yoddhas actually used to cross the border. They were trained on the other side of Bangladesh, which means in Indian soil, and they used to come and attack the Pakistanis there. So that was a great help, India, throughout our war of independence. And we are grateful to them for that. Britain itself actually played a major role in the independence of Bangladesh, outside of Bangladesh. You can hear it from your parents, how the British Bangladeshis at that point in time has supported our independence in different ways, by raising money, by protesting, by having movements in different parts of Britain. And it's not only in London, in Manchester, Liverpool, and other places, how people, the British Bangladeshis, have actually raised our voices, raised our concerns. They have brought our concerns to the British Parliament, and a lot of British MPs supported us. So we also actually recognize, and with gratitude, the kind of the support that Britain provided. The USA, people of USA have supported it. But there are also countries which actually were not supporting Bangladesh. One was China, which was sided with Pakistan, and one was USA. And basically the government of USA was more interested in supporting Pakistan by exporting ammunition, by exporting other kinds of things to Pakistan. So the world was divided at that point in time when we were fighting our war of independence. On your second question, you are absolutely right. I mean, the life expectancy doesn't increase all by itself. There are reasons. One is, of course, you can tell that if there are developments in biomedics, if there are developments in medicines, if there are developments in vaccines, for example, vaccines against the kind of cholera, vaccines against the kind of other diseases, rubella or measles, definitely that helps. The other thing that helps is that if you have an improvement in public health system, if you have mother-child care center, if you have other institutions that help. The third thing that helped this or helped us in achieving a better life expectancy is basically the kind of the way of life that we live, that you have referred to, because that socioeconomic conditions also help. When you actually teach girls, teach mothers, and if the mothers get educated, they are more concerned with better nutrition of their children, better health care. So public health also play a major role in increasing life expectancy. So it's a combination of different reasons. There's not a single reason that can be identified. But compared to India, some of the infrastructure, public health system have improved. We now have better access to safe water. We have better access to sanitation compared to India. So all these things actually help in achieving a higher life expectancy as Bangladesh has achieved.
Thank you, Dr. Selim Jahan. I'm sure Aayan must have been enlightened. And can I ask Auria or Aydan, any of you, two of you has got any question? Who has got question, Aydan or Auria? Aydan, you have a question?
Yes, I actually have quite a few things to mention.
Sure.
I think one of us mentioned about Pakistan taking our crops. I have something to add on to that. During the Second World War, I think some of us might remember the Bengal famine of 1943.
Mm-hmm.
It was like an artificial. It was actually like an artificial famine because the British soldiers, we had to keep on taking crops from Asia, so they had to take crops from India mostly, and from Bangladesh as well because they needed it for their soldiers. Winston Churchill later said that it didn't have anything to do with us. It was the Indians and Bengalis' fault. They didn't grow enough of their food. And the second, and one of the other things I wanted to mention is also about the economy. So we made garments and clothing, and if you go into the clothing shop like Primark, you'll see most of the clothes are from Bangladesh. The work factories where they work in, they're not highly paid because business sellers like Primark or M&S, they wouldn't pay the company in Bangladesh so the Bangladesh manager couldn't give money to their families, so it was harder for them to cope. And the last thing I want was a question. As our world changes, climate change is also happening. How do you think Bangladesh will cope with that?
Good. I think you have raised three very interesting issues. One is, of course, historical. One is related to the garment industry and everything. which has a global dimension. The third one is the climate change, which is also a global problem. On the first one, about this famine in 1943, couple of things played its role. One is, of course, you have mentioned that they needed food for the soldiers, the British soldiers there. You see, the problem of famine starts not because there's a shortage of food, but there is an artificial shortage created. And the famine doesn't start because there's not enough food, but there is a distribution issue. And in 1943, what happened was that the food was there, but most of the food was taken on the other side of the Ganges just to hoard it. So it's basically the hoarding part of it which created an artificial shortage. So you are absolutely right that it was a lot of this kind of political economy concerns that actually was at the very root of the famine in Bangladesh. And in fact, famine in any country, it's also people do not get food because these artificial shortages are created. So that is the first one. The second one on the garment industry part of it, it is a complex problem, we all know. It's not that the kind of the concerns or the establishments in Britain or in the USA, they don't pay enough. It's basically the garment owners inside the country which actually try to exploit the workers. One part of the exploitation is, of course, pay, as you have said. I mean, when you go to a superstar or a mall in London and you see the price marked on a shirt or a sweater there, and the price that is being paid to the people who have made it, there's a huge, huge profit margin. And that profit margin is basically taken by all kinds of middlemen. Now, that's one part of the problem why there was, where the workers who work on this garment, who work in this garment industry are not given a fair pay. The other part of it is the kind of the protection that they should enjoy, the kind of the right that they should enjoy. The workers must work in a situation which is safe, but the worker safety is not maintained all the time. I mean, we know the kind of the accidents that have happened in different garments industry. So one is the pay part of it, one is the safety part of it, of the workers, the rights part of the workers there. So I think those are the two things that need to be mentioned. And the third is on the climate change. Climate change is a global issue. I mean, there is a national issue, there is a global concern also. Bangladesh, as you know, like Maldives and other places, have the tendency of going down, of sinking. And that we have some part of to it, but there is also a global part. The part that we are responsible for is there has been lots of deforestation in the country. There has been a lot of actions which are not sensitive to climate issues. In the name of development, we have developed infrastructure and other facilities without taking the climate as a concern. Even as citizens, sometimes we are not very careful about environmental sustainability, the use of plastic, the use of other things which are detrimental to climate and to environmental sustainability. That's one part. The other part is that for countries like Bangladesh and Maldives, the reality would be determined not only by our action, but what other countries have been doing. If China actually does its business with coal and its production with coal, it would contribute to the CO2 emissions. And when you have the CO2 emissions going beyond that danger level, then it will have an impact on your environment, on your climate change. And countries like Bangladesh or Maldives, which doesn't produce that much CO2 or does not emit that much CO2, would be part of that, part of the problem that is being created. So on climate change, I think there has to be a kind of a global discussion. Who are the CO2 emitters and who are the victims of that? There has to be an awareness about this environmental sustainability and everything. As you know, that there has been a Paris Agreement to it, and I think we should implement that kind of agreement. And it is something which we have to deal with collectively. It cannot be done, it cannot be solved by individual action or by individual country. Farah, I think you have to unmute it, Farah. Yes.
Thank you, Aydan, for that lovely question. I'm sure you got your answer, and other children also got to learn a lot from Dr. Selim Jahan. And I would like to ask Auria, before I go to Yusuf, Yusuf has got some question which he has sent me inbox, but before that, I would like to ask Auria. Auria, do you have any question for Dr. Selim Jahan? I know you have shared a lovely story, but yes, if you have any question in your mind. You can ask anything about Bangladesh to Dr. Selim Jahan.
If you don't have any question, Auria, let me ask you a question. Do you know any freedom fighter? Have you talked to any freedom fighter on the whole question of liberation war? Do you know anybody? Or have you heard anything from them?
Unfortunately, no, not really.
We don't know really. But have you heard the stories about liberation war from your parents or from your grandparents and everything? Can you share one of the story that you have heard? I think you have to unmute. Yes.
I have heard about it, but not any stories in particular.
Okay, good.
I think she already shared her story.
That's
about
true.
Dr. Sitara Begum.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
So if Auria doesn't have any question, then let me go to Aayan Yusuf. Aayan did raise about the free medical provision for the Bangladeshi people in Bangladesh. So Aayan, would you like to ask your question?
The medical is not free in Bangladesh, so how is the government providing service to the poor?
I think that's a great question. I mean, it's also applicable to the education sector, but let me concentrate on medical. In Bangladesh, there are 3 different health systems, if I may put it that way. One is that government health system, which is more or less free, or you have to pay a very nominal fee. The second one is this private health system, private clinics, private facilities where you have to pay. And then the third one, which is very strange, is that people who are wealthy and who are powerful can go outside of the country to get the health services. They can go to Bangkok or Singapore, or even come to London or to New York to get to their health services. So, because you have a trio health system in Bangladesh, what happens is that the public health system, where most of the people who are poor, who are marginalized go, that is the most neglected one. This is the most neglected one in terms of doctors, nurses, beds, and that kind of thing, most neglected one. In Bangladesh, there are almost 1 physician per 7,000 to 8,000 people. So you can understand the demand is very high compared to the supply. So there you can get help services which are not quality services, which were substandard. Then comes to the private sector, where you can go to private clinic and everything. You can get the services, but the quality is also still not good. And therefore, the people who can afford it, they go outside to either to Bangkok or to Singapore and get services there. So as a result, I think the health services, which is a universal human right, we have not been able to ensure it for everyone there. In the UK, you have the national NHS. Everybody knows about it. People are covered by the NHS. But Bangladesh is a place where actually you don't have that kind of health insurance. So as a result, I think people who can afford it are getting the best healthcare outside of the country. People who are middle class, upper middle class, getting the services from the private sector. But people who mostly need it, the poor and the marginalized, are not getting it. There are also kind of disparities between the health services in the capital city, in urban areas compared to the rural areas. So I think that is where lots of health deprivations for majority of people in Bangladesh happen. And a similar case can be made for education also, where also we have 3 streams of education in Bangladesh.
Aayan has got another question. Aayan, go on, please.
Where is he?
I think he went off the screen. So I would go to Pracchya or Rafan. Rafan, welcome to the show. Rafan is our new guest.
I think Rafan, you have to adjust your camera.
Rafan, yeah.
We can't. No, not yet.
Rafan, can you hear us?
I think yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think.
Hello, Rafan. Yes, yeah, that's
exactly.
better.
Can you move it a little bit right, maybe?
Okay, let us go to Pracchya while Rafan adjusts his camera.
Yeah.
Pracchya, please.
Somebody has to unmute or mute. Yes, Pracchya.
When was Bangladesh's flag created? Who came up with the idea?
When the Bangladesh's flag was created.
How was it created? What's the story behind it?
Oh, that's a great. That's a great. I think the person who designed the Bangladesh flag, his name was Shiv Narayan Das, and he was a student of Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology. And I think it was in 1970 or 70 when they have designed that flag. Basically, it was designed by him. It was tailored somewhere in Newmarket there. And that particular flag at that point in time had 3 things. One was that it had that green that we can see, the background. Then we have had the red circle in the middle representing the blood and also the sun of independence. But what you don't see now, but it had been there, was a map of Bangladesh in golden color in the middle of that red circle. And on the 2nd of March 1971, that particular flag was hoisted in Dhaka University when the declaration was made that there won't be any session of the National Assembly. And we all went mad, we were angry, and we all basically went to university, and there were movements, and that flag was hoisted at that point in time. And later on, the map was dropped for the very simple reason that the map has to be perfect. But when you try to do that map in the flag, sometimes the map is distorted, and you should not distort the map of a particular country in that way. So later on, that map was taken away from that. And in 1972, I think it was the artist Kamrul Hassan who has given the kind of the final shape to this flag in terms of the color, in terms of the size, and all kinds of things. So that is the history of the flag in short. Did Wafeeq raise his hand, or he was just stretching?
No, he did raise his hand actually. So we can take a question from Wafeeq. Question or opinion? Wafeeq, please go on.
Adding on to Yusuf's idea earlier on hospitality, why is it that the issues related to poverty like housing, hunger, education, medical, agriculture, business and industries are still affecting the country very critically?
On that one, I think one has to recognize that we have made good progress in terms of reducing poverty. The poverty has been reduced, for example, from 58% to 21% between 1990 and 2021, which is quite spectacular. Of course, with the advent of COVID-19, there may be increases, and experts are also fearing that the poverty may again rise, but that's one issue. You see, it also depends on what we have inherited a social system where poverty has been there. There has been disparities between cities and also the rural areas. There has been disparities between labor and, for example, those who owned it. There has been disparities in the cities between the rich and the poor. So when Bangladesh was born, we have inherited a structure where disparities were there. There were disparities between men and women also. Over the years, there have been lots of initiatives, not only by the government, but also by the NGOs and the civil society to provide public services, to reduce these disparities, to reduce the kind of the poverty there. So we have made a dent on extreme poverty. There's no doubt about it. But you are absolutely right. There are still extreme poverties because about 35 million people are still living below extreme poverty. But there has also been increase in relative poverty, the kind of the inequalities there, which I have already alluded to as a major problem that Bangladesh should be facing. Why it is happening? Because the status quo is being carried out. Why it is happening? Because the policies that are being undertaken have got an urban bias and also an affluence bias. And in fact, if we cannot make our policies and our interventions pro-poor in every sense of the word, it's not only the resource allocation, but also do we have input policy which are basically pro-poor or pro-rich? Do you have kind of the public expenditure which help the poor people more? Are we expanding jobs in sectors where poor people work? I think those are very fundamental structural issues that we have to deal with. And then we also have to deal with the social sector. Should we have a kind of a three-tier education system or three-tier health system? Of course not. Because education and health are universal human rights, there should be one tier for everyone. So I think those are the things that need to be changed, and for which it is not only the state which will change it, but it is the people who have to raise their voices, who have to demand that kind of things. And if there are changes on these things, then we will move towards that. And we want to emphasize that Bangladesh was created with 4 principles. One is, of course, the principles of nationalism, the principles of democracy, principles of secularism. But the 4th principle is the principles of socialism. But the socialism is not in the sense of Chinese socialism or the Russian socialism. Socialism in the sense of social justice. There has to be social justice. It has to be a just society where we can actually help people. We can raise everybody so that we can get rid of poverty, inequality, and everything. Yes, we are moving towards that. There are challenges. Sometimes we get derailed from that. That is also true. But I think this is something that Bangladesh will have to achieve during the next 50 years of its independence.
Thank you, Dr. Selim Jahan, and thank you, Wafeeq, for that wonderful question. I would like to ask Rafan. Rafan, do you have any question for Dr. Selim Jahan?
1971 স্কুল কিভাবে হয়েছে?
1971 স্কুল কিভাবে হয়েছে?
Thank you.
Good question. What happened was that because I think you are trying to compare it with the COVID situation now. What happened in 1971 was that when the attack was basically unleashed on 25th of March, there has been the closure of schools, universities, colleges for some time. So after the Pakistani rulers actually took grip of the situation, I think by March, April, May, around that time, schools and colleges and universities were opened slowly, but some of the people have come back, some of the people didn't. It also depended on where they were and how was the situation with their family, because lots of the families had moved to the village areas. Some of the families have crossed the border. So the situation was kind of a diversified and asymmetrical. In Dhaka University, we have seen that students have come back, but not the full capacity. Lots of the students have took part in the liberation war. In schools also, some of the people have come back. And the students who came back, some of them have parents who were government employees. So there was a pressure on them to come back there, and it continued. But the major point I try to make, education has been disrupted very heavily. And if I take my example, for example, I did not go back to the university at that point in time, and education was disrupted. As a result, when we were supposed to get out of the university in 1973, actually we got out of the university in 1975. So we lost about 1.5 years, 2 years. And that was the story of everybody who was a university student who graduated at that point in time. So I think during the 1971, the educational system was carried on in a truncated way, but to get it back to normal, it took almost at least the middle of 1972. But in the meantime, time was lost, education was lost, and people tried to catch up there. But at that point in time, lots of people have lost years, if I may say so.
That was a very interesting question. I'm sure, like, as you have mentioned, Dr. Selim Jahan, that it might have come to his mind because they have been to the COVID and they haven't been going to the school for a long time. And they were doing online schooling. So they must have felt that way.
Hand raised.
Who has got a question now? Pracchya, Yusuf, yes, please.
There are a number of freedom fighters unmentioned in the independence time. For example, my father's cousin, Rahul Amin, died during the time Bangladesh fought to gain independence. On November 20th, which was Eid al-Fitr, my father's cousin was travelling to the mosque to pray. He was unarmed and went with friends in the community, and he was ambushed by the Pakistani army and unfortunately died at the scene.
So sorry to hear that. And this is the story of many families, actually. And I think lots of the people were picked up from their homes. If there's a suspicion that they were part of the liberation war, lots of the people have been picked up from the streets, and there have not been any kind of traces of those people. I mean, your father's cousin, our respect to him, and like him, lots of the people have lost their lives there. In rural areas, in villages, the Pakistanis have attacked villages. They have set fire on many houses, and people lost their lives in that way also. The third thing that I would like to mention that, as you know, that when the liberation was very near on the 16th of December 1971, on the 14th of December, the Pakistanis have picked up a lot of intelligentsia in Dhaka city and other cities. So the university professors were picked up, the journalists were picked up, doctors were picked up, and they were tortured and killed on 15th, 14th of December. And if you go to Dhaka and you go to the Rayan Bazaar, where they have been killed, or Mirpur, for example, so you can see the kind of the signs that how they have been killed. So, in fact, there has been a genocide in Bangladesh. When you lose so many people, when there have been killings like this, this is a genocide. And I think the international community should recognize it as a genocide. If we think about genocide in Armenia, for example, there has been big genocide in Bangladesh. And I think all of us should actually raise our voices so that the international community and the world as a whole recognizes that Bangladesh has had a genocide in 1971. Farah. Farah, you have to unmute yourself.
Thank you so much. Pracchya, I think you have been waiting for long. Do you have anything in mind, dear?
No,
Any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Nothing. What about Auria? Not yet. Okay, Wafeeq? Rafan?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
As we know how rapidly and successfully Bangladesh grew economically in a short amount of time, what does it mean by the third world and the first world countries? And where is Bangladesh placed on that scale right now?
That's a great question. That is a great question. I think these are some of the nomenclature that we use, which have to be reconsidered. Number of the nomenclature or the kind of the words that have used have come from the Cold War era, when there was a Cold War between the USSR and USA. The whole issue of developed and developing countries that you come across in your economics book or your social science book is also a misnomer, because every country is developing. So what is the point of saying developing and developed country? Some of the countries which are now part of the developing countries may be more developed than some of the countries in developed world. South Korea is more developed, but it cannot be a developing country. China is very developed and developing at a breakneck speed. But how can you say developing countries? I think the whole issue of the first world and the third world actually has been created in a kind of a, I would not say a very sensitive way. And when you call the first world like the UK, USA, France, Germany, and you say third world like Bangladesh, China, India, I think that is not right. And what I say that this kind of black and white division, this kind of black and white definition is not correct. There is a third world in the first world. If you look at Britain and you look at some of the places, if you look at some of the cities or some parts of the cities, there is a third world. I know from New York, if you go to Harlem, for example, that is a third world next to Fifth Avenue, which is a first world. So there's a third world in a first world country. There's a first world in a third world country also. If I take Bangladesh, and if you go to places like Gulshan or Baridhara, the kind of the life the people lead there, the kind of the wealth they have, can be comparable to the kind of the standard of living in the first world, or even better. So therefore, I think we have to get rid of this black and white division and the definition. We have to remember that there is a first world in the third world country. There has to be a third world in a first world country. There is a first world in a third world country. We have to make it one world. I think, Farah, one thing, I think Yusuf has sent something on the chat box. Yes, Yusuf. It is the 35th largest economy in the world in nominal terms. That's very important. And 30th largest by the purchasing power parity. That is also true, PPP. And then, yes, it is. It's going to be out of that. It has already graduated from the LDCs there, and the expectation and the goal is to reach the developed world, of the developed country status by 2041. So we are moving forward on the whole question of achieving that kind of status there. Yes, thank you for posting it on the chat box. Farah, unmute.
We are already at the end of our show. It's been 1 hour, 12 minutes, and I'm so pleased, so happy to see all these children coming up with interesting question, intriguing question, and contemporary question. So I would like to go to each children one by one and ask them to share anything, say anything about Bangladesh, or if they have anything in their minds in 1 minute, and then we can go back to Dr. Selim Jahan. So who would I start with? Aydan, do you have a question? Would you like to say anything? Yeah.
How do you think the soldiers felt when freedom fighters felt when they were fighting?
Sorry, say that again. Sorry, Aydan. Missed it.
How do you think the freedom fighters felt when they were fighting?
Okay. Let me think about, should we take more questions and then come back? Or
yes, definitely, yeah. Aydan, we are already at the end of the show. We only have 10 minutes to wrap up the show. So if you have any final question to ask, that what would you like to see Bangladesh as, or anything as such. So this is for everyone. Like we are going to end the show. So last question and last opinion from each of you. So let me start with Wafeeq. Wafeeq, you have 1 minute to go. Thank you.
I don't have much to say, but thank you, Selim Uncle, for informing us about the history and how our country have both developed economically and socially over the last few years or decades.
Thank you so much, Wafeeq, and we really enjoyed your question, and definitely, it's a privilege to have you in the show. Now I'd like to come to Auria. Auria, your last word, please.
The show is really informative and I really enjoyed it. So thank you a lot.
Thank you for being with us. Pracchya, any opinion or any last question on your mind?
And thank you for I learned a lot of things, and I also made a short video about the 25th of March. Earlier today.
Oh, how lovely. I wish we could have it. Then we could have showed it on the show. Why didn't you let us know that you made a video on 25th of March? Thank you for that. Aayan, Yusuf, last word, please.
I don't have much to say as well, but I would like to thank Dr. Selim for being here and speaking to us today.
Aydan, anything? Last question? Not a big one, a small one.
All I would like to say is thank you for letting us explore our culture more.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Auria Zahir. Thank you, Rayan Pracchya. Thank you, Yusuf and Kabir. Thank you, Wafeeq Zaman. Thank you, Rafan. Thank you, Aydan Ahmad. So on behalf of them, I would like to ask Selim Jahan a question. Since they are British Bangladeshi and they are our second and third generation kids, so would you like to say anything to them, like how can they contribute as a British Bangladeshi for the Bangladesh?
I think that's a great question. I'd like to answer some of the questions and then come back to make some general comments. One is Aayan questions, how did freedom fighter feel when they were fighting? People went to or joined the war of liberation to liberate their country. And as you can understand, the feelings were at that level where lots of the people have said, we are not going to come back unless we can liberate the country. So it was a kind of an emotion. It was a kind of achieving something which actually prompted them to join the liberation war. And we recognized them and we remember them with a lot of respect and a lot of love. So that's one. The second, I think it was Pracchya who said that she has been making a kind of a film on 25th of March. One of the things that you can Google or you can search, there has been a film made by one of the teachers of Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology through his window on the morning of 26th, when the students, the bodies of the students from Jagannath Hall were, yes, Pracchya.
I included like that short video.
Good, thank you. The quality is not very good, but he, at that point in time, that teacher has just returned from the UK after finishing his PhD, and he did it. But that's the one document which actually exists. So I'm very glad that you know about it, and you have included it in your video. Three concluding remarks. One is, I really enjoyed it, and all the questions have been brilliant, and it not only shows your interest in the subject, but it also shows your desire to know your country, know your culture, to know the history of it. Because you always remember that wherever you live, whatever you do, if you are uprooted in the sense of not having roots in your history, in your culture, then you are a very lonely man. And so therefore, I really appreciate your interest. All the questions have been great. I'm not sure that I have responded to you to your fullest satisfaction or answered them in a way you wanted to be answered, but I tried my best. But I would say that let us continue this kind of the discussion in future on many things. Independence of War of Independence is one thing, but there can be other things on which we can have discussions. But you are very interested in the whole thing. You came up with lots of questions, and this has been a most satisfying interactive session, and that's what I like most about the 1.5 hours that we have spent together. The second thing is, coming back to Farah's question, I think always remember that your parents or someone else who are in London or who are in Bangladesh, doesn't matter. They actually contributed to our War of Independence in different ways. So you are basically carrying a tradition of contributing to our own country, tradition of helping the countries, tradition of understanding its literature and everything. Keep up that tradition. In Britain, as a British Bangladeshi, you will be exposed to other cultures, you'll be exposed to other knowledge. Those are all important. But this is also part of what you are and part of what you will be. So therefore, I think through reading books, through searching Googles, talking to other people, talking to your parents, you will know more about the country and everything. And when you go back to Bangladesh to visit your family or visit different places, talk to people. You will know a lot of it. And my final thing is that thank you, Farah, for organizing it. My thanks are also to Bijoyphool, whose platform we are using. And I'm also grateful to Opu Islam, who has been taking care of not only the technical parts of it, but actually organizing the whole thing. So Farah, thank you very much. And thanks everyone who have taken part of it. I look forward to interacting with you in future once again.
Thank you, Selim Jahan, for your time and patience, and I'm sure everybody have enjoyed listening to you. The reason we chose the secondary school student, because they are 11 to 15 years old and a very crucial stage, and they have lots of questions in their mind. They wanted to know about their roots, so that's the reason we chose our secondary school student today. And thank you, Bijoyphool, thank you, Opu Islam, thank you, Poet Shabi Mazat, for giving us the chance to speak about Bangladesh, and I'm sure our children has enjoyed. So today we are signing off from the Bijoyphool page, and we are wishing everybody a very happy Independence Day, and last but not least, thank you to our children, Auria Zahir, Wafeeq Zaman, Rayan Pracchya, Aydan Ahmad, Yusuf, Aayan, Kabir, and Rafan, Haseen.
আমার সোনার বাংলা, আমি তোমায় ভালোবাসি।